Okay, let's go ahead and get started in the next section, which is 6.2. And we're going to be dealing with inverse relations and functions. So we're really, I shouldn't say we're going to deal with both because I'm not really going to go over inverse relations, even though I'll kind of cover it a little bit, but I'm not going to give you any problems in there. But an inverse function is a function which has the points a and b, and another function which contains the points b and a. So what happens is that you'll notice that for the first function, x is a, y is b. For the second function, x is b, and y is a. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but we'll go through graphing and you'll see kind of how that works. But the points basically, the x's and y's shift on each other, and you'll see how that gets graphed. So moving on, we're going to look at some inverse functions. I just want to show you a graph just to kind of take a look at it and see how these particular functions work. So looking at the activity, here we have a function a. So notice that we have 2.15 and 6.94, which is this point right here. And then we have point b, which is 6.94 and 2.5. And so we can see here is our function and here is its inverse. Now notice that if we look at this line right here, this is what is known as my mirror line. If you remember, we were doing mirror lines that were vertical, that would show things on either side, and that would give us an idea of how they rotate, that kind of stuff, and how they looked. This time now we're rotating the sense over this mirror. And so you can see that this point right here, the same distance from this point over here to this point right down here. Right down here, we can see that they are mirror reflections of each other. So that's what we can see when we're looking at those different types of functions. Okay. So, of course, the inverse relations, remember x's and y's just shift position. So first thing that we're going to take a look at is we're going to take a look at this. How do we know if things are inverses? Now, first off, there's some terminology that you need to know. We have our function, which is f. We have f to the negative 1 power is called the inverse. If f of a equals b, then f inverse of b has to equal a. So that means we're going to check that out and see what we do when we start plugging things in. So our first problem that we're going to be taking a look at, so notice it's mirrored across this line right here. And we can see that f of x is our function, f inverse of x is our inverse function, so f of a equals b, so f inverse of b has to equal a. So that's just a repetition of what we went over. So now, how do we go through and do this? So let's say that we have a function called f of x, which is equal to x minus 5. And this function, we want to evaluate it at 7. So f of 7 means that we plug in 7 minus 5, that equals 2. So f of 7 equals 2. So then f of 2 has to equal 7. So if we plug it in here, 2 plus 5, that equals 7. So f of 2 has to equal 7 for these to be inverses of each other. So therefore, they are inverses. Okay, so that's what we do to check them, just to see. We plug in a number for the original function, and then we reverse the x's and the y's, and plug it into the second function and check to see if it comes out to be the opposite. So notice in this case, x is 7, y is 2. In this case, x is 2, and y is 7. Okay, so looking at that, how do we know if a function has an inverse based on a graph? So if we take a look at this particular graph, I know this function does not have an inverse. The reason that I know it does not have an inverse is because if I draw a vertical line, that means that it is a function. Remember, we do the vertical line test to check to see if something is a function. To check to see if it's an inverse, if it has an inverse function, we draw a horizontal line. So here's my horizontal line. And in this case, it goes through 2 points, so it is not a one-to-one function, which means it does not have an inverse. So therefore, there is no inverse. Sorry for the dogs barking. They're playing right now. Anyway, so that's the first part. That's kind of the introduction. We're going to go to the next video and continue on from there.